Well, I don't know if you remember that a couple of weeks ago we looked at perennials, big versions and small versions, and I said we'll come back and we'll look at trees and shrubs. That's what we're going to do today. Now here's a fine example behind me. This great big, looks like an evergreen. It's actually a bald cypress. It's a deciduous conifer, so it forms cones like all the evergreens, but it will drop its leaves in the fall. Now that is a parkland plant. It will grow, down south in Louisiana and the bayous, it grows obviously in the swampy conditions, and you get those knees coming up. But up here, we're just about at the limit as far as we can grow it. But for most people, they're not going to put trees like that in their yards. They're going to put a smaller version. And look at this. It's done extremely well this year. It's got a lovely foliage. It's a cascading weeper. And even in the winter, when the leaves have fallen off, it goes a beautiful rust color. When the leaves fall off, you're left with a lovely skeleton that will collect the snow. So if this is too big for you, this is probably about 10, 12 feet across, I've got another old beauty to show you. How about this as an example? This is another bald cypress called Falling Waters. It's new to me this year. It stays much more narrow and add a beautiful vertical accent in the yard. It has to be staked up because it would just cascade on the ground. But once staked up for a few years, you can take the stake out and it will stay put. All right, let's look at some other big and small plants. Of all the hydrangeas we sell here at Greystone Gardens, perhaps my two favorite groups are the wood hydrangeas, or smooth hydrangeas, and the panicle hydrangeas. I love them because every year they flower without fail, whereas the common macrophylla, the blue, the pinks and the reds, not reliable. So let's start with the wood hydrangeas. Now this is Annabelle, it's just a young plant. They will form a mass of white flowers. It tends to be a little floppy. We'll get up to about 4 feet and could flop over, so it's best against a fence or something like that. The name wood hydrangea suggests it doesn't mind the shade, and that's true. But on the smaller side, and I'm sorry I've only got this tiny little one here, this is a wood hydrangea, and it's called Invincible Wee White. Same white flowers, but tiny height. It's only going to be about 1 to 2 feet tall, so about half the size if it grows well. The bigger size, we have one across the parking lot here at Greystone Gardens called Incredible, and it really is incredible. It's a massive plant, and if you want a big spectacular look to fill up a large area, that's the way to go. If you've got a tiny little space, then the wee white will be the way to go. And the same happens on the panicle side. Panicle hydrangeas, they may be about 15 feet square, big round kind of shrubs. This is a similar one to it. This is one at the back areas called Firelight. It's nicely behaved compared to the old-fashioned PG. It has the most beautiful fall color. When cold air comes onto those flowers, they go a beautiful color. The common privet, or the oval-leaf privet, I think it's actually a wonderful little plant. It has pretty flowers. We're catching it in full flower, healthy green leaves. Nothing seems to want to eat it. It could get to at least 15 feet tall if you left it unpruned. Typically, though, they're hedged. They're trimmed twice a year to keep it compact and tight, and they do make an excellent hedge. So even in fall, when the leaves drop, the branching is so dense you really can't see through it, so it keeps its privacy nature quite well. What I also like is that the flowers are slightly fragrant, and it will form black berries. And when the cold gets to it, the leaves actually go a black color, so it's a real dark looking object. And if you've got a tree that goes yellow or a shrub that goes yellow, the black next to it can be quite interesting. Talk about yellow, though, this is the yellow form. This is the Vickery privet. There's more yellow here. This one I just dragged out from a bit of a shade and it went green. But in full sun, it's quite bright yellow. And it makes a smaller hedge. Typically, you can be 3 or 4 feet. This tree shrub will only get to about 10 feet tall. If you want something even smaller, this is not a great specimen, but this is the Ludense privet. Much more compact, will only get to 3 or 4 feet. And I have to tell you, when I lived back in England, I had 150 feet of privet hedge that had to be trimmed twice a year, and it was about 10, 12 feet tall. It's not a lot of fun, I tell you. There's a balancing act going on there, which I never want to do again. So I will go with something just the right size. But I certainly would recommend a privet if you just want to plant just to screen stuff, because it's vigorous, it grows quickly, and it will block, especially in the summer, and give you an interesting color in the fall. One of the best plants you can have to add some winter attraction to your yard is the native Winterberry. Now the Winterberries typically are 10-foot, 12-foot square plants that they can grow in partial shade, they grow in sun. They do like moisture though. They're kind of a wetland plant and will do very well in wetter soil. And the Winterberry is actually a holly. It's a deciduous holly, a holly that drops its leaves. but it gets covered in berries. So when the leaves come off, you'll see berries everywhere, and it's a stunning red glow, especially with a bit of snow around it all. Now, just like regular holly, you have male plants and you have female plants, and you just need one little male tucked away, and that will service all the female plants to a point, because some males flower early, some flower late. So it's a little bit more tricky than that, but I'm not going to get into that now. I just want to show you there are smaller ones available. And right in front of me, I've got a real classic. This one from Proven Winners is called Berry Poppins, hence Mary Poppins, Berry Poppins. And this will only get to 3 or 4 feet, be covered in red berries, and you need a small male. And this is Mr. Poppins next door. And Mr. Poppins, though, is able to fertilize berry heavy, the big one. So this plant will actually get much, much taller, 5, 6 feet. If you can give your plants extra moisture in your yard, then they will thrive, and they will be wonderful throughout the winter. So there you go, winterberries, but winterberries in the smaller form would be a great choice for a small yard. So when it comes to roses, there's the same kind of choice. There's an enormously big ones, and there are very small ones. I've made a selection of 3 I think are kind of interesting. This is an absolute classic. This is the New Dawn rose, and I have one at home that it must be 25 feet tall. It's a big spreading rose, but if you haven't got the room, then you need to think smaller. This is a wonderfully hardy rose. This is a rugosa rose. Now, if you know rugosa roses, you know that they could be tall and they could be covered in thorns. This does get a few thorns on it all, but it stays very compact. It's called a pavement series. Pavement as in low. This gets to about 3 feet, so that's low when it comes to a rugosa rose. The pink drift is very, very good. This is the white drift, very, very dense. You probably have to shear it back a little bit to get it to reflower again. Oh, I forgot to say, this new rugosa will flower all summer long. So here's one final tip with a pinch of salt. So to reduce the size of trees, if you can't find a smaller variety, you can use pruning and root pruning techniques to restrict the size. Behind me, I have this glorious Frisia black locust. Beautiful big trees up there, 30, 40 feet tall. If you haven't got room, then by pruning, or like this, a bonsai style, it's not real proper bonsai, but it's kind of what we do to keep these trees small. This is actually an interesting one because it's a twisted black locust. Normally it will get about 20 feet tall, but in here we're going to keep it just compact. So there you go. I hope you learned something. There are lots of choices out there and different techniques to keep things smaller. Well, you need it, but if you've got room, fill up your yard with lots of wonderful green plants. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.